Hi guys, welcome to Third Stall Garage. My name is Doug. This is an episode 3 in the final and the conclusion of rebuilding an old bench vise. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, please jump in and watch those. And then we're gonna wrap this project up this episode and see how this bench vise turns out. So if you've got questions, comments, suggestions about how you might do this project differently, I would love it if you'd leave a comment below, leave a suggestion as to how you'd better enjoy the videos. That would help me learn. And this channel is all about learning. All you need is a willingness to try, and kind of once you dive in, well, you're in it now and you figure it out from there. So let's see how this bench vise project turns out. Thanks. Time to start getting ready for painting. So I have all the parts hanging in the garage from my paint hooks. These are just a bunch of hooks I made from leftover chain link fence wire so that it's easier to spray things. I'm gonna do a couple step process. First step, I'm gonna use OSPO. It's like a rust converter. It is phosphoric acid mixture. You can get it at Ace Hardware, Walmart, other places. It's water consistency. Some people brush it on. I'm gonna spray it on. The instructions aren't perfectly clear as to what's best. For cleaning and etching metal, it says that you can put it on for a half hour until metal is etched, then flush off with water. Avoiding damage to adjacent areas. It does say to avoid flash rusting on ferrous metals, a top coat system may be required. I am a little worried about whether I should rinse it with water or not. These instructions say basically put a thin coat on. I'm reading the second line there. It comes pre-diluted. Let dry for a minimum of 24 hours, then apply paint. It says nothing about rinsing it, or I think you would just then wipe it with, whatever, wax and grease remover and that kind of prep. So I'm gonna put some into my lovely purple spray bottle and then put a light coat on it and check it in a half hour, see what it looks like. Otherwise, I will be back tomorrow to see what it looks like and see how I feel about this. So let's get started. The main reason I'm interested in doing this is that the cast iron is just so rough. There's no way for me with a wire brush to get all of that perfectly clean and rust free. I don't want it, beating up or starting to rust after I painted it. So my hope is this is gonna work to convert any rust that would be under the paint. And then I wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. I really do not want to get any on my Jeep. Being pretty careful about that. All right, I'm gonna focus on spraying and not videoing. So it has been 24 hours. And you can see where there's some residual that's built up that will have to get cleaned off. And you can see where this used to be all kind of silver and red, and most of the red is gone and turned kind of black. And there's a little bit of powdery surface to it. It's supposed to turn to like a black primer, and this, this is what I was expecting There's a little bit of a brown patch there, and I'm guessing maybe I didn't get enough of the OSPO on there. If this were, yeah, there's a little spot there and there. If this were really critical, important, I would probably do it again, but I'm kind of eager to get primer and paint on this. So I'm going to run with it the way that it is, because it is just a bench vise. So I'm gonna take it down and start cleaning it up, and then we'll get it ready for paint. For this one, I'm gonna try something a little bit different. This round surface with an unclear edge, particularly with an inside ID, is a little bit hard to tape. So is this bottom edge that isn't real clean either. So I'm gonna take just a little dab of grease and just put a little layer of grease on there, which should, in theory, prevent the paint from sticking. And then I should be able to clean the paint off fairly easily when I'm done. These are also surfaces that are gonna probably end up with a little grease on them anyway. Seen this done in the past, have not done it myself. So we will find out whether this was a time saver idea or not. Okay, getting closer to paint. I'm going to be using direct to metal epoxy primer by Summit with a catalyst, spraying it with my Black Widow spray gun made by Spectrum. You can purchase it at Harbor Freight. It's not their cheap guns. It's the Harbor Freight's version, high quality version of a knockoff of really expensive guns. I think this was like $250, something like that, compared to $1,000 or something for a really good gun. And then I'm using the Spectrum Universal Paint System. This is just really slick. Gives you a cup that measures. You mix your paint in this really flimsy liner, and then you put a top on it that has a really, you can't even see it, there's a really fine screen in there. This goes on top of your gun. All the air goes out. I'll show you. Works pretty slick. Okay, I don't really know how much I'm gonna need. I'm gonna try to do maybe 1/2 to 2/3 of a cup. And it's a 1-to-1 ratio of the epoxy primer to the catalyst. So let's just, I'm gonna measure on this milliliter side. So maybe I'll go 200, 250, and then match that with the catalyst. Let's go 250. Okay. Okay, we are just shy of 250, which means I need to bring it just shy of 500 milliliters total with the catalyst. If you're not familiar, the catalyst is what kind of activates the primer, what makes it hard and cure well. All right, we'll put the lid on. So that snaps on, and then there's just a collar that screws on. That gives you a stronger, more secure fit. And there's these little caps which snap on. So now shake that up, and then the little cap comes out. gun screws on. And turns. Like such. All right, I'm going to turn you to face the painting. I have my airline hooked up on the other side of the shop to my filter, dryer, regulator kind of painting system. We're regulated down to, I think, about 40 PSI there. And then I have I think it's 50 or 60. And then I have a regulator on here. If I pull the trigger halfway, just air comes out. And I'm running about 25 PSI right now. What I'll do is I'll turn the cup over, and if I pull the trigger halfway, just air comes out. If I pull the trigger all the way, it starts sucking the paint up out of here, and the container that the paint is in will collapse as it pulls all of the air out. And then when the paint actually starts coming out, or the primer in this case, then I can stop and I know all the air is out of the system. I think we're there. You can see how it kind of crinkled it up. So we should be ready to paint. Time for coat number 2 of primer. Okay, it is the next morning. Taking a primer, looks really nice. Can't really tell whether that's paint or primer, but it is primer. I really hope it works to have just put grease underneath there, and if not, I'm gonna have some work cleaning that out. So that will be a lesson learned, a good one or a hard one. But I'm happy with the way these are turning out. So it is time to move on to paint. So I'll be using the Chassis Shield Satin along with Catalyst for it. Yesterday I mixed, it was a 1-to-1 ratio. I think I mixed about 250, a little less than that, which brought it up to about 500. This is the amount that I had left over. So I used barely more than half of it. So that unfortunately is gonna go to waste. It's kind of interesting to see how it settled out over the night. So I'm not gonna waste as much this time, so I think I'm gonna put about 150 cc's in of the paint and then 150 cc's of the catalyst. Instead of trying to pour it, I begged and pleaded and got a permission to take a scoop cup out of the kitchen. So this is gonna be part of the paint cabinet here. So I'm gonna mix that up. I've got the gun clean and back together, and then we're ready to spray. Time for coat number 2, then about a half an hour. Time for coat number 3, to use up the rest of the paint. I had enough paint. I thought I would run out on coat 3, but there's a little bit of paint left in the gun, so we're going for coat 4. Might as well make it nice and thick. So I am not leaving fingerprints when I touch it anymore. It is, it's taken a couple days for this to cure because it's a little colder in our garage than the normal, hence the furnace kicking on again. So I'm gonna start seeing if it works to clean that up where I put grease on it. Let's see. All right, so this flat surface and on the inside is where I put grease on it. Kind of peels up. Let me get a little scraper. Honestly, that's way better than I thought. I thought this was going to be a disaster. Once I did it, I kind of regretted it. But let's see. Same thing with this inside. That works. I must have put it on a little heavier there. Comes off pretty good, and it's got a nice layer of grease on it. All right, that's done. On to the next piece. I'm curious to see how this one turns out. This is the one that was so pitted that, yeah, it looked awful. I put 3 coats of primer, 3 coats of paint on this, so I don't know if that's gonna make it harder to break it off, or seems to be peeling pretty good. Have you ever had fun picking a scab? It kind of feels like that, except you're not going to get in trouble. There we go, all cleaned up. Time to start putting it together. Hi, welcome back. For me, I've been gone for a little while. It's been a couple days letting the paint harden and getting it cleaned off, but it's time to put it together. I'm excited for this. So this is basically the giant nut that goes underneath the bottom of that, and it's how the whole base of it spins. So we're gonna, I would say minimally, not liberally. Just put a thin layer of grease on things. I don't want it to ooze out all over or collect too much dust and dirt. But I do want things to be a little bit protected from rust and just slide nice and smoothly like it should. That will also prevent it from rusting. Put a rag underneath there just to kind of hold it up a little bit. And then this base will go on top. Just a little bit of grease there. I thought about doing grease on kind of the whole inside, but then I thought that that would just be a recipe for collecting dirt, and decided to put as much paint and primer in there as I could. So everything inside is painted fairly well too. So this should go on there. And then these guys will hold it in. While I put this together, I'm learning a lot in trial and error, and it is anxiety causing putting yourself out there in videos and figure out how to edit them. If people have suggestions as to what they like, what they don't like, what works well, what's boring, zoom in more, zoom out less, more time lapses, less time lapses, things like that, let me know. For this video, I think there are a lot of time lapses in it because a lot of the work is kind of fun to see done, but not necessarily that exciting to watch. Like, I am just screwing this in. Woohoo, not very exciting. But it's part of the process too of seeing things put together. So open to any suggestions, and a lot of this is just gonna be time-lapse stuff. So, hey, thanks for being along for the learning curve. The biggest thing you need is a willingness to try, right? One of my mottos. And, well, we're in it now. Can't undo tearing things apart. Okay, so we've got a base down. This piece goes in next. So we want a little grease on this flange all the way around. Furnace is on, sorry. And then it runs in the collar here and there. So I only really need to put a thin layer of grease on this edge here. And then, oh man, I got it all over my hand. And on the edge back here. Ugh. And on that edge. Oh, let me wipe off my hand. All right, in theory, this should slide in. Now that big slot, I think, is gonna be for the big old keyway on this thing. So that should go in there. Spin nicely, which it does. Okay. I think, what's next? This guy. That makes sense to go in next. I'm not going to screw it on tight though, because that prevents it from turning. Or rotating would be, that screw is not going in. All right, I think I figured it out. It's not that the bolt will not start in the threaded hole. It's the fact that the head of the bolt will not go into the hole anymore. And I think I built up too many layers of paint in there. So I've got what I think is the appropriate size drill bit just to kind of clean that up a little bit. Yes, and goes right in now. I think there was just a little bit of paint there. It was getting hung up on paint, or it might have been a little bit, I bet it was a little bit of JB Weld from when I epoxied that. All right, we're gonna go just quarter turn off of snug. So that will spin for now. All right, getting closer. That bugger's heavy. Okay. All right, bottom, our regular jaws are in. Now it's time to put in the pipe jaws as well. And here's the finished product. I love it. I'm so happy with it. Learned a few things along the way. I was not patient enough in waiting for the paint to cure. So here you can see a spot where that's an imprint of the rag that I set it on. And I got a couple fingerprints here. But I like the black and steel look together. Things, you know, move real smoothly. I did decide to narrow this a bit. It was as wide as this and stuck out before, and that just looked kind of funny. You know, the jaws in here I think will work well, and it's obviously not, or maybe not obvious, but I think you can tell it's not original. I had 3/8/16 jam nuts for these, like that, and then I discovered I think this is a metric thread. These are English, that's English, these are English, but apparently that's metric. So who knows? I am happy with the way this turned out, the way that it looks. I think it will be a good beefy vise for a long time and will serve me well, and is one that I won't hesitate to put something heavy in there and beat on it, or try to bend it or forge it, or, you know, if I'm really trying to clamp it tight, put a big breaker bar on that. Now, if I just had a sturdy bench to put it on. So that's going to be one of my next projects, because every time I hammer on this, everything rattles and I've got too much stuff that's loose. So stay tuned for the next project. But thanks for following along. If you've enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and that will help other people find videos like this.